Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs, welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. I am your host, Dave, and this week has been something else, you guys. Okay, so for the past couple of months, you know that I've been working on our portion of 5/5 of The Princess Bride. This was a live performance of The Princess Bride for the Atlanta Fringe Festival. I was working with my pal, Mr. Bo Brown, and a colleague of his who perhaps should remain nameless, not for any reason other than he was doing this purely as a favor and as an enjoyable endeavor and is not seeking any credit for it whatsoever. But so Mr. Bo Brown wanted me to play a large human Andre the Giant against various forms of puppetry, acting out the last about 20 minutes of The Princess Bride. Now, obviously not the whole thing through and through. It would just be highlights. We'd pick out the funniest or most dramatic or most entertaining bits and kind of make a little show out of them, which we did. I think we were hugely successful. There were 4 other acts, obviously. It's called 5/5 of The Princess Bride, ranging from drag burlesque to a gay comedy troupe to a lady who's absolutely wonderful, and I hate it. Her name escapes me right now. I have seen her perform before, I think at one of the Puck and Fuppet shows. She was mind-blowing. She was definitely the main event as far as I'm concerned. And then Crazy Sexy Cool, a People of Color improv comedy troupe. And then finally, myself, Mr. Bo Brown, and our partner. And I'd like to say we were the last ones, and we brought it home. The show ended on a very, very strong note. We delivered the funny. I'm very proud of myself for my performance. Andre the Giant has a very specific way of speaking and delivery, and it would be very easy to, rather than picking up on his deep giant voice and his French accent, to kind of ease over into maybe more of a simple-minded kind of thing. And I like to think I stuck to the tone of Fezzik fairly well. But we were great. We had an amazing time. We were treated very well. Everybody was nice. It was just amazing. And if you weren't there, I'm sorry. I do actually have video of the entire performance, but I'm not going to put it up because you should have been there. And there you go. So that was absolutely outstanding, amazing, and wonderful. And then last night, after I got home from work, I talked to the delightful Dan Kozuh, who is a writer for The Hard Times, among many, many other things, and who has a new novel out called Lingeria, Book 1 of 1, which you can find on Amazon right now. It's either a digital copy or print. I recommend it. It is a humorous... I don't know how to describe it, but it's okay. I don't need to know how to describe it because Dan is on the show today, and we have a great conversation about writing, about pop culture, about movies, about all kinds of stuff. You know how we do here on the show. An interview is not just an interview; it's an exploration of the world. But Dan was great. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I actually hope that we'll be able to get him back on at some point for one of our roundtable shows because he's got. That fella seems to have some fine taste. So anyway, that's coming up in a minute, and you will enjoy that interview. Before we get to that, ladies and gentlemen, I have a contest. Now, originally, I had my own contest, but I'm going to put that on the back burner because we have a much bigger and more important contest that we're going to talk about right now. This is a contest where you can win a thing. You can win an actual, a free, cool, awesome thing. So listen up, slap nuts. Our friend of the show, Bobby Nash, award-winning Bobby Nash, has just released the audio edition of the Snow Series 1, Volume 1. And this is a big deal because this is our pal Bobby, and he's in the audiobook business now. So you can get his books, and you can play them in the car, listen to them on the way to work, listen to them while you're working in the office. It's a great way to read if you, like me, no longer really have the time to read. So the entire audio edition of Volume 1 of Series 1 of the Snow Series is now available, and what I would like to do is give you a copy. Just give it to you, free digital download to one of you lucky people. Now, here is what we're going to do. I need you to go on to Twitter. Now, I know I don't enjoy Twitter. I don't like Twitter, but it seems to be the best way to handle podcast contests because they're easy ways to pick winners, easy ways to find your contestants. It's just sadly the most functional social media platform for this sort of business. So what I need you to do is get on Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, then just write me a letter. I'm kidding. Everybody has a Twitter account. And you will have the opportunity to win a novella collection by Bobby Nash. Half an inch is all that stands between life and death. Abraham Snow, former undercover agent turned do-gooder, helps those in need while searching for the man who shot and left him for dead. Snow, Series 1, Volume 1 collects the first 3 Snow stories, Snow Falls, Snowstorm, and Snow Drive, together for the first time. Snow Falls. After a near-fatal encounter while deep undercover in South America, Abraham Snow retires from his work as a government operative and returns home to re-enter his life. Things don't go as smooth as he hoped, and soon Snow finds himself reunited with old friends and in the crosshairs of a hired assassin. Snowstorm. Snow's former partner, Samson Brooks, a retired agent turned PI, arrives in Atlanta with a problem. He's gotten into some trouble with some bad people and needs Snow's help to get out of it. If they can't rescue a kidnapped college student, the underworld erupts into all-out war. And finally, Snow Drive, 2018 Pulp Factory Award nominee, Best Novel. Danger at 220 miles per hour. The Chambers Stock Car Racing Team hires Snow Security Consulting to stop a saboteur before their next race becomes their last. Can they keep the team's young hothead out of trouble long enough to stop the saboteur before the next race? Meanwhile, an old enemy sets her sights on Snow when a bounty is placed on his head. Ben Books presents Snow, Series 1, Volume 1, featuring 3 action-packed stories from award-winning author Bobby Nash. All right, so you can win all 3 of those stories. All you have to do is go on Twitter, tweet Needless Things Podcast _ it's Needless Things _ See, that's how often I use Twitter. What a lame-o I am. Needless Things _ at Needless Things _ and you're going to hashtag Phantom Snow Stories. That's hashtag Phantom Snow Stories to at Needless Things _ I hope you're following the Needless Things podcast on Twitter. If you're not, get on there and do it. And that's all you got to do is this will last. You have until June 12th, let's say. June 12th, June 11th. No, we're going to say midnight on June 10th. Boy, I really planned this out well, didn't I? You've got until midnight on June 10th to go to at Needless Things _ and hashtag Phantom Snow Stories. And we will pick a winner, and Mr. Bobby Nash himself will announce the winner live pre-recorded on next week's Needless Things podcast. So, awesome contest. I'm very excited to have that be part of the show. It's Writer Palooza this week between the award-winning Bobby Nash and the delightful Dan Kozuh. What a great time we're having here with creative, awesome people. So now it's time to listen to a little bit of music, and after that, we're going to talk to Dan and have a great time, and you're going to dig it. All right, I've got a very special guest this week on the Needless Things podcast, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a while, but I'm a little loopy today, and I feel like I'm in the need for a little bit of a icebreaker here. So we're going to start off with a question, but before we do, I want to welcome to the podcast Dan. Oh, shit. Hang on. Dan, oh, shit. Welcome to the show. Let's try that again.
I'm sorry, it's pronounced Kozuh, not oh shit. I can see the phonetic.
See, I told you know what? I'm just going to leave that. That's perfect. We're gonna start with that, and now everybody understands why I'm like beginning this with a basic bitch question instead of my normal just going into stuff. So, Dan, here is your basic bitch question to break the ice and start the show. Favorite toy or toy line when you were a kid?
Ooh, I had a huge collection of Micro Machines. That's what I remember collecting.
Oh, nice. Now that's one we've not heard on the show before.
It's weird. My friends all had He-Man and Transformers. For some reason, I didn't get those. We didn't have I didn't have a lot of toys, but I got really into Micro Machines. But the weird thing was I kept them in a trash bag for some reason. I can't remember why, but my dad threw them out. Not like angrily, like he didn't realize what he was doing, and it devastated me. And that that's what a vivid childhood memory is. My Micro Machines getting thrown out by accident, and he felt awful about it. But I never tried to recollect them or anything. They were just gone.
It's interesting you bring those up though, because I was, I had Hot Wheels when I was a kid, just because my dad was a big car guy. He grew up working on cars on his dad's car lot. So I had tons of Hot Wheels, but I was never that interested in them. But for some reason, when Micro Machines hit, those seemed really cool to me.
Yeah, I was the same way. I didn't collect Hot Wheels either, but Micro Machines were so unique, because you could get like Army versions and Land Rovers. They were much more creative, I think. I think that might have been why I drifted towards them. They were just very unique.
Yeah, they did. In a way, they were a little cooler looking than Hot Wheels, like as far as the deco and the style of them, and they were it was the same kind of thing but tinier, but there was just something cooler about those little tiny cars.
Yeah.
And then later on when they got into doing like the James Bond cars and the Indiana Jones cars and like Star Wars stuff, like they branched out, and it really became like one of the biggest brands of the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, I kind of forgot the brand stuff. I did have a lot. I think I had a whole bunch of them. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's funny when something starts off, because, Lego did the same thing for decades. Lego was just straight up, here's your box of bricks, make your castle, make your spaceship, and then all of a sudden it's Star Wars, and it's like a whole different thing, which is Micro Machines, same way. Star Wars crept in. Nobody can resist Star Wars, basically, is the merchandising rule. So what we're going to talk about tonight, now that we've gotten that little bit out of the way, you have an actual, for real, published book, Lingeria, Book 1 of 1, which I really enjoy. Book 1 of 1 as the sort of subtitle there.
Right.
But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the hassles, difficulties, and joys of having an online writing existence, I guess. Because prior to being aware that you actually did have a published book, you've done things on several different websites, you do a lot of writing online, and I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to know how you got started with writing in the first place. I would assume before you even really got online.
Yeah, I honestly, when I didn't write like prose when I was young. I didn't have the attention span for it. And I didn't have the confidence either. I didn't think I could. But as soon as I learned that there was something called screenwriting, which was probably like in like junior year of high school, which I knew screenwriters existed, but like the kind of format of it is I wanted to be a screenwriter. Well, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went to film school, but I was going to be the writer-director, the serious writer-director, talking about the pains of life and making serious art. And so that's really where I started writing was handwriting screenplays, and that's what I kind of always thought I was going to do. I didn't anticipate writing prose or comedy or anything like that until probably until my 30s, really. I kind of always loved comedy, but never thought it would be something I would want, like really kind of focus on.
Oh, that's interesting, because my assumption from seeing your stuff was that this guy was probably funny when he was a kid. Like in my head, you were like entertaining the other kids, being the funny guy.
No, I'm really quiet typically. Like doing these podcasts, I'm actually like pushing myself to be more like open and like kind of put myself out there.
Sure,
but I'm actually very quiet. I've always been a very quiet kind of kind of just. I think I've always kind of enjoyed humor. I've always loved to laugh. I love people making me laugh. I love like just joking around, and it's I mean, laughter is one of my favorite things in the world. But comedy wise, it was that's what I realized is that I would write these very serious, like awful screenplays, but I couldn't take them seriously. I couldn't take the characters I created seriously. Other characters would start making fun of them, and there was always like a line of humor. But I took myself so seriously in film school that have you ever seen the movie Sullivan's Travels?
Okay, who's in it?
Okay, Veronica Lake. It's an older movie. It's an old Billy Wilder, maybe Preston Sturges. I'm getting my guys confused.
Sure.
But it's about a filmmaker who only wants to make serious films. He's going to go out during the Depression and learn the pains of people, and then like there's a kind of the whole idea is people want to laugh, and I'm like, well, maybe I need to stop taking myself so seriously, and then I found the Hard Times, which is what I mostly write for online, is the punk music satire site, the Hard Times, and their new site, the Hard Drive. That's what I really write for now.
So how did you make the connection? Well, before we get to that,
sure.
If you have always enjoyed comedy, what are some of your earliest comedy memories? Were you reading like books by humorists, or were you listening to comedy albums? Who were you getting into like when you were young and kind of first discovering that people just did comedy as a thing?
Yeah, that's the funny thing is I think like I was obsessed with Mad Magazine for like, but I think I felt like that kind of grew out of the ground. Like there weren't people somewhere actually making these jokes. It's just existed and it's being sent to me in the mail. This like there can't be people who make a living off of this. Most of them probably didn't. They probably freelancers with day jobs like I do. But yeah, Mad Magazine was like the first, and I was obsessed with it. I had the subscription and I saved them all and put them in sleeves. I lost them all now, but I loved Mad Magazine, and I don't know how, but my house had a tape of Eddie Murphy's Best of Saturday Night Live. And like I grew up in a very religious household, but for some reason we had this tape, and I just loved it.
That's wildly out of place.
Yeah, I assume it was my brother's that he probably left or something. I don't know how it worked, but I loved Eddie Murphy. And so I found Raw and Delirious.
Oh yeah.
Too young for me to understand what they were.
Yeah.
But just obsessed with them. And then who else? What other stand-up did there was Eddie Murphy was my guy. I can't remember. I know Steve Martin. I loved but I think I discovered him a little late, like his stand-up a little later. I loved his movies.
It's funny. I think most of us did because if you saw any early Saturday Night Live, you saw a little bit of Steve Martin, but didn't maybe necessarily relate him to doing comedy because I think we mostly knew actor Steve Martin.
Exactly.
I didn't even see like his stand-up stuff or become aware of his stand-up albums until, I mean, it might have been the 90s before I even really knew he did that stuff.
Yeah, it was probably late 90s for me too. I think you might be a little bit older than me, so we were probably hitting it about the same time.
Yeah.
But like Louis Anderson, I like his stand-up was one of the funny, and it was clean too, and it's just one of the funniest. His early stand-up is some of the funniest material you could ever. And then I was actually from your podcast last week remembering how obsessed I was with Weird Al.
Oh yeah, dude.
I mean, he shaped my childhood. I can't even like express like if I were to meet him to tell him the influence he had on my childhood. I don't think I'd even have the words for it.
I took my son last year. He did a tour that was him, no costumes, no set dressing, nothing. Him just playing his original stuff with a few parodies sprinkled in here and there. And I took my son to it and did, just because you never know when it's going to be your last opportunity to do something. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do the VIP thing. We're both going to go backstage. We're going to meet Al, and this will be for both of us a huge, because my son's first concert was Weird Al a few years ago.
That's great.
Yeah, and it was one of the big, costume change deals. He had a great time. So we went, we saw the show, and then afterwards backstage, I at this point in my life, I've gotten pretty good at meeting people, like even when they're idols or famous people or whatever.
Right.
I interviewed Ric Flair last year and handled it,
Right.
But Weird Al, I mean, he raised me about as much as my dad raised me.
Right.
Just the status. So the whole night, I'm just like, what am I going to say to this god? And we walk in, and I had worn one of my spectacularly tacky suits. So fortunately, that saved me, because I walked in, and he goes, "Whoa, stop. Let me just take this in." Wow. Yeah. So he kind of broke the ice, so to speak. And,
right.
He's like, "Where did you get that?" So I gave him the information for where the suit came from and everything, and we talked to him for a little bit, got the pictures, and I was just, at that point, I was just like, "Thank you so much. You're absolutely incredible." And he was like, "That suit is incredible." And then we went on our way. So it worked out. It was fortunate, but I was just, I didn't. What do you do, man? Somebody big.
And one of my probably my most successful Hard Times article was about Weird Al, and he liked it and shared it, and I mean he has no idea that I'm the one that wrote it, and it was still like him kissing me full on the lips, like it was the best validation I could ever receive.
Similar to that, this one blew my mind, and you've probably had this experience a few times, I would imagine, beyond just the Weird Al one. Years ago, Anthrax is my favorite metal band of all time. One of my favorite bands, but my for sure favorite metal band. Same deal. We did the VIP experience for Anthrax because, again, you don't know. This was just me and my wife. My son was a little too young for the metal show at the time. But on the Needless Things website, I had written a retrospective article on my fandom of Anthrax, and we get into the VIP room, or we're in line for the VIP room, and the guy running the thing comes up and he's like, "Are you the wrestling mask guy?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Are you Phantom something?" And
no,
blew my mind. I was like, I am. And he was like, "Joey can't wait to meet you." I was like, "Are you fucking what? What are you talking about?" And now, retrospectively, I realize Joey Belladonna probably has like a Google alert for his name or something. And it's not like he's reading my website on a daily basis and checking out my He-Man toy reviews. But we get back into the back room, and Scott Ian and Rob Caggiano are there at the table, and I walk in, and the VIP guy is like, this is Phantom Troublemaker. And Scott Ian kind of doesn't react. And he's like, where's Joey? He's always in the back. Okay, go get Joey. Joey walks out, and he's like, whoa, what is happening, man? And I was just like, this is fucking insane.
Wow.
Joey Belladonna from Anthrax is delighted to see me. This is stupid. There's no...
oh, my God. I'd be a puddle. I wouldn't even know what to do.
Dude, it was nuts. And the whole time, though, like, as enthusiastic as Joey is, Scott Ian is kind of standoffish. He's not being rude by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not as excited as Joey is. So we get pictures, and he's like, wait, are you going to get a picture with the mask on? I was like, of course I'm going to get a picture with the mask, because I back then I brought the mask everywhere, because that was my like public persona. So we get a picture with the mask, without the mask, with the wife, without the wife, everything. We're having a blast. All right, well, we got to go. Time for the next people to come in. Thank you so much. And he was like, you're gonna wear that mask during the show, right? And I hadn't planned to, but when Joey Belladonna wants you to wear your wrestling mask during the show, that's what you do.
Yeah, obviously.
So, went up, had the mask on, go up front, and he's like pointing at me and making all these crazy mask gestures with his hands and rocking out. After the show, I'm kind of wondering, I'm like, what was the deal with Scott? And I realized that in my retrospective thing that I wrote about the years where John Bush was singing for Anthrax and how I didn't particularly care for those years. Joey wasn't in the band at that point, but Scott Ian still was.
Right.
Still plugging away, still trying to make Anthrax music, and old Phantom Dickhead just didn't like Anthrax at that point. And I don't know that that's what the case was, but having seen interviews and stuff with Scott Ian and seeing he's pretty gregarious and outgoing, I kind of suspect maybe that was a little bit of what was going on. So have you had like other artists kind of find your stuff and share it and be appreciative? Because you have a whole different thing going on where you actually have to use some creativity for what you do.
Yeah, I not a whole lot of like reaching out from what I remember. From what I remember, Five Iron Frenzy, who as a Christian punk growing up.
Yeah.
They were my favorite band. I saw that, like, I literally started working for the company that booked them in the Chicagoland area so I could, like, meet them and give them water backstage. And I just made some random passing joke about them, and the one girl in the band texted me, or not text, but, like, Facebook messaged me and was like, and I had said something about all men and like, playing ska or something. She's like, there was a girl in the band, and I'm like, I didn't know how to, like, it was totally tongue in cheek, and she said I love the article, and like, but it was like, that's how she started it, and that just made my day. But I'm trying to think that there's a lot of people kind of share it and like it, but not.
The site is huge. I mean, it's definitely I don't want to say a social media juggernaut because that feels kind of reductive, but it is like it pops up on Facebook constantly. It is a phenomenon.
If you love like metal and punk, you'll definitely know people that share their stuff. And for how homegrown they are. I mean, they don't own an office. There's no brick and mortar to them. They work out of their bedroom still, even though they have 2 million unique hits. Like, but I'm just a contributor, so those guys get reached out to. I haven't, but I don't try and seek that out either, because I'm kind of awkward in person, and when I have to talk to people one-on-one, like we are right now, I'm trying my best. So,
well, it's tough, man. It's especially in this day and age. I feel like genuine communication is in a weird way, even though we've got the internet and in theory it should be easier than ever. I feel like it's almost more difficult now because we're not as connected by the same things as we used to be. Like in
yes,
the
100%.
in the 80s and in the 90s. How old are you? I'm 43.
Okay, I'm hitting 38 in a couple
30.
months.
Okay. So right around the same era. In the late 80s and the early 90s, like to a certain extent, everybody was listening to the same music, or at least was very aware of the top 40. Like, my mom knew who the big artists were at the time. Like, she knew who Sheryl Crow was. Now, I have no awareness of who that might be because everybody can kind of do their own thing. Like, there's no common awareness anymore, I feel like.
Oh, I mean, even in the sub-communities, like when I see the top 10 metal albums to come out at the end of the year, I'm like, I know 4 of these maybe,
Right.
Like it's insane, like how mass, I think this many existed then, but they just couldn't get themselves out there. So like the Philly metal community can now reach the world, and so one of their bands can have the top 10 album of the year through Pitchfork because of that. Which
is awesome. Like, it's great for independent artists to basically not need record labels at all anymore. But it's also this weird thing where, as a result of all of this specialized, niche, individual stuff, people aren't on the same wavelength like they used to be. Yeah,
I think it feels like there was almost something that passed when, and I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but people who did, that was feels like the last kind of cultural touchstone that everybody, even if you didn't watch it, you knew about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but there's nothing to fill that void. You've got like the Marvel movies that are a fairly common experience because like even my mom goes and sees all of those, but it's not the same level of with Game of Thrones it was almost like because it was such an odd thing for so many people to be into.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah,
because it's this medieval thing, like it's a dramatic, but it has dragons, and it's it's such an unusual thing to have hooked so many different kinds of people. Because like I work in a relatively square environment, but most of the people I work with were watching Game of Thrones.
It's right, exactly.
Yeah, and also. Not only that, the fact that it's on HBO, it's not even on like NBC or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to make a more specific effort to see it.
That's really true. And I felt that way. Like when Battlestar Galactica came back out, like the reboot came out, I loved it from like episode 1 because somebody had told me to watch it. Like I didn't realize I was going to love it. But then around like season 2, everybody was watching it. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't understand this cultural phenomenon. Like I love it. I know why I love it, but I'm shocked everybody's talking about it right now.
And it's one of those things where, I guess I don't know the world as well as I thought I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like people, and I guess that's kind of a good feeling. It's like when that many different kinds of people like something that's genuinely cool, you're like, you know what? It is possible for us to be on the same page about things. Like there's common ground out there. We just have to talk about it and get into it.
Like, did you hit this point? This happened to me recently, where like there was everything culture's so saturated right now, and not even in a bad way. But I was just like, I used to really try and stay up on things, like stay up on what people are really watching, especially like watching sci-fi and anime and things like that. And I just hit this breaking point where I'm like, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to watch what I want to watch. I'm going to go back and watch classic Doctor Who episodes because that's what I want to watch right now. I'm going to stop trying to keep up because I just can't.
Yeah, I have definitely hit that wall. And a lot of it is just because there's so many different venues now. Like Amazon and Hulu and Netflix and then regular TV and cable TV and whatever new streaming service is coming out of some big conglomerate's ass, and they have one show to try and hook everybody with. Like, there's just too much. You've got to kind of pick and choose. As a matter of fact, the other night, my wife and I sat down to watch Nosferatu, the new AMC show. Because anything
I don't even know that exists. I literally had no idea that existed.
And dude, how often does this happen? Where you see like something on Facebook or something on a website about such and such show renewed for 4th season, and you're like, I've never even heard of this show.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
But we sat down to watch Nosferatu because in any horror or sci-fi, we'll give it a shot. And we got like 20 minutes in, and we both knew like this is not. We just turned it off. We're like, we're not even going to try. There's too much other stuff. Like you said, matter of fact, I've actually got Tom Baker's first, 6 stories on DVD because I've been going back through those. They're sitting on the floor right in front of me. But, yeah, I've got, not only is there plenty of new stuff coming out, but there's older stuff that I still enjoy consuming, too, because to me, movies and TV that's good is always worth revisiting. Like I'm not, there's some stuff that's kind of one and done, but the stuff that I really love, I get something different out of it every time, even if I don't necessarily notice, oh, that character does that, and I didn't even notice it the first time. Like as you get older and as you grow, you take things in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And you look, yeah, you do. And you especially probably, I don't have any children, but I have a feeling that, I think I watched Freaks and Geeks, maybe. I can't remember what it was I rewatched recently, and I was connecting more with the adults.
Oh, yeah.
With the adult subplot. Let's go back to that instead of the kid that I connected with when I was young. And it's really interesting to kind of look at it through that lens again.
Yeah, it's funny, going back to all the 80s child endangerment movies that we loved so much, like The Goonies, watching them as a kid, you're like, these kids are awesome, and as a parent I watch them and I'm like, these kids are in trouble. This is dangerous. But
DCFS should really be notified about this.
Absolutely. But also, one of the cool things is having, my son's 11 years old now, and, getting to experience some of this stuff sort of through his eyes. And the fascinating thing is, I've been taking in media for 43 years now. Very rarely does a movie do something that surprises me because I've seen it all. I've seen every kind of, nothing is new anymore. And so, all the twists and turns, every once in a while something happened. I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of super movie genius, but if you've been watching movies for 20 years as a fan of movies, you pick up the beats. You know what I mean? And I can't remember exactly what movie it was. This was like a year or so ago, but we're sitting there watching the movie, and it hit me. I was like, he doesn't know what's going to happen because he hasn't seen 50 movies exactly like this one. This is like an exciting revelation. He doesn't know that the guy's actually about to come back when you think he just died. He doesn't know that, oh, that's actually going to be his sister. It's really fun to get to see somebody taking stuff in with fresh eyes, which is one of the reasons I enjoy introducing movies and TV shows and stuff to people.
Yeah.
Have you got any passion shows or movies or anything that you're always kind of eager to be like, oh, you got to check this out?
Oh, I own close to 1,700 DVDs, so I
very much
like to. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what I really gravitate towards. You got to watch this. You really, and I think I'm going kind of back and forth. But The Prisoner, the 1960s BBC show,
yes,
is one of my favorites that people kind of like. Yeah, I know the Simpsons episode that makes fun of it, and I kind of know but I'm like, no, you really got to see. It's only 18 episodes, and it ends, and you that's one I really champion, and.
It came on.
Honestly, my mind's what's that?
It came on Saturday nights. It was either before or after Doctor Who. I can't remember what it was, but it was on PBS here. Did you grow up around here? Or you mentioned Chicago.
I grew up in the West Chicago suburbs.
Okay. So here in Atlanta, Doctor Who aired Saturday nights at 11:30 11 or 11:30 on PBS, and The Prisoner, it had to come on before it because I don't think there's any way I would have stayed up after Doctor Who was over. And that's how I was as a kid. I was watching The Prisoner, and I didn't understand it. Obviously, I had no idea what was happening.
Still don't understand it.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. But it was cool. It's just so cool visually, and it's almost a different type of acting than what we have now. Like it's this very interesting, like standoffish but suave. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, it's almost like James Bond, but with if he wasn't trying to like kind of I can't even explain it.
It's almost like a
like
Bond
Patrick McGoohan. It was like his baby, and so he kind of invented this, and it's so confusing because and that's what I kind of love about it is you don't know what is kind of production error and what is intentional and what is just bad writing, and and so you kind of have to put it together in your own head and make sense of it yourself.
It's almost like a Bond who is at the end of the road and maybe is a little self-aware. Yeah,
exactly. Self-aware and just and realize that he maybe he was working for the wrong team, perhaps, or maybe both teams are the same, and like just burned out.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. There is very much a sense of there are no good guys in that world.
Yes, exactly.
And he knows he's definitely not one of the good guys, but he also knows he wants to get off that fucking island.
Right. And he like turns on the charm when he needs to, but he really doesn't want to use it anymore. And
yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. The Prisoner is definitely worth it. It's not very few things will I say, oh, you're definitely totally going to like this, but it's worth giving a shot for sure.
Yeah. I used to be obsessed with David Lynch, and so I would really push that on people. I've kind of backed off now. I actually was kind of unhappy with the last season of Twin Peaks, but I'm still a fan of a lot of his work, and so I used to really push him on, like, you really got to check him out. But I'm actually huge on John Huston. His movies are kind of, I mean, like 5 of his movies are probably in my top 5 movies of all time. I kind of love that he's sort of the anti-auteur. All of his movies are different. They all kind of serve themselves. It's not his vision. Right. It's kind of like how every Wes Anderson movie is very Wes Anderson. His are very different, and I love his way of kind of communicating.
Oh, that's very interesting. What? Okay, I know the name, but you're going to have to throw me a title.
Sure. The Maltese Falcon is his kind of the most famous movie that he directed. Okay. That was only his second movie he ever made. But like the Man Who Would Be King, Wise Blood, Fat City, he has more Prizzi's Honor.
Okay, yeah. With Nicholson, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I love filmmakers whose work is immediately recognizable as theirs, but I also have a lot of respect for people who are very selfless with telling a story.
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. Is selfless is the way he kind of, I mean, he's an actor in almost all of it, like a lot of his movies. So I guess he's not selfless because he likes to be in them. But what's the one? Treasure Sierra Madre, where I think his dad was in.
Oh wow, okay, that's one of my dad's favorite movies.
That's so he's just. I think I've seen almost all of his movies. It's like 30 some, and I really suggest his movies. And then I'm big into Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki's films. I try to get my 15-year-old niece to really. I'm like, you should watch this cartoon. Well, I guess she's a little older now, so I already made her watch them. But when she was younger, I think she loved The Cat Returns. Spirited Away was a little much for her to handle. I think she was a little young when I showed it to her at the time.
You know, it's thinking about the older directors, like those guys worked like crazy, didn't they? Because thinking about somebody who has 30 movies, like how many of our modern day big name directors even have 10?
Yeah, and 10 quality movies. Like it's
right.
I mean, Houston had some duds. He did a version of Moby Dick that is just pretty unwatchable, but but yeah, and his career, I mean, he spanned from, I mean, Maltese Falcon must have been 50s, right? Maybe early 50s. I don't know. And then his last movie was in the 80s. He directed from a wheelchair while he was dying of cancer. Like it's just, and he has a autobiography called Open Book that's just amazing. And he's everything he's everything of a man I wish I was.
Right.
Just fearless and like just didn't care, but he also had like 5 wives, so he didn't treat people the best. I have a feeling,
I think dudes for the most part, especially like accomplished dudes, probably didn't back then.
Right, good point. And like he tells stories of like he directed The African Queen with Bogart, and like how him and Bogart only drank whiskey because the water had dysentery, like gave him dysentery. And so, and like I can't drink like more than 2 shots or else I'm throwing up. Like it's just such a different version of myself that I wish I was.
Right, that's awesome. So with that little bit of pop culture background laid out, at what point did you really get passionate about writing?
I've always been passionate about storytelling. And so, like I said, I wrote screenplays in high school. Like that's kind of, and as soon as I found out movies, I became obsessed with them. And I think to a fault, like I kind of stopped experiencing life and just like focused on movies. And then kind of towards the end of college, I'm like, no, I should have been living and experiencing things.
Yeah.
And so, and I still, even through film school, I was still like, film, that's it. And it really was a confidence thing. I'm like, I have a bad attention issue. I can't focus to write prose. I'm not good enough to write prose. And so screenplays, it's like, they're not going to read this. The actors just need to say the words. But I would always be very descriptive in my scene descriptions because I'm like, I'm going to make this movie. I need to remember the kind of tone that I'm looking for. And so it was.
So you're very much as a writer, you're visualizing everything in your head. You're not just putting it together as something for people to act. You have a whole cohesive picture in your head.
Yes, because it was either like I'm going to direct this or somebody else is, and they should know kind of what I'm going for. What I'm like, and like that's what everybody says is in your screenplays, don't do big scene descriptions, 1 paragraph. And I'm like, well, crap. And so I had been hired to write screenplays. And when I did those, I did do I did it for them. And so I'm like, here's like very short. This isn't my movie. This is yours here. Like, and so I was able to kind of separate myself from it. But for my work, I did make it. They were very long and kind of very descriptive. I tried not to put too much. I didn't put a lot of inflection in the dialogue because I like working with actors and I like being like, well, let's see where they're going to take it. Because that's one thing I actually really like doing is letting another person kind of interpret the way I'm doing because it opens you up and you're like, I never thought of it that way. And it can give you a whole new, I love playing. And I did improv in college and that was one of my favorite things was kind of getting out of my own head and just playing with a scene. And that's what I kind of love doing with actors as well is letting them take it where they want it.
Yeah, that's one thing that's very interesting about various kinds of storytelling is like some of it is so personal and so intense that it has to be done a certain way, and some of it is very much a collaborative, open experience that you actually learn from, and it sounds like you enjoy learning from sort of, I guess, feeding other people a little bit and then seeing where they go with it. Yeah,
totally. Like, and because there were like people in film school and other filmmakers that I know who are like, oh, actors are just moving props. They do what I tell them. And I'm like, get over yourself. Like your work is only going to be better if you let people be creative with you and let people give you their ideas. And you can say no. I mean, that's like 99% of directing is saying yes and no is to other people's creative ideas and just molding it. And so I think that I think at first I wanted to be that control freak, and then the more I played and the more I let go, the more I'm like, no, this is getting only better. And that's kind of towards the end of my education and post-college was like, I don't want it to be me. I want it to be the story. Everything should serve the story. The lighting should serve, like a camera movement should only serve the story. It shouldn't be because this is a cool shot. And you see movies where you're like, well, they wanted to do a cool shot, but this is ruining the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Definitely. There are times when style really sort of corrupts the film itself. Mm-hmm. But there are other times when style is everything, and it's fine. Like the Wachowskis, like, are all style, and it works for them, and it's awesome.
Yeah. But and it doesn't feel like theirs. Like, even like The Matrix feels different than Why is Speed Racer the only thing coming into mind. But they feel different. Like they have a theme to the kind of world that they're building for each different story that they tell.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that they have a style, but they're very good at building these kinetic, visually intense worlds, and that's what they do. But they do it in service of the thing that they're doing. Because yes, The Matrix and Speed Racer and come on, yeah, that's all. That's all they've done.
Jupiter Ascending.
Yes, but everything, like. It's basically like they were the only ones crazy enough to do this, but each experience is very different.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And like, I don't want to shit on Wes Anderson a lot. I do, like unfortunately, but Bottle Rocket and Rushmore and like the Royal Tenenbaums are some of the greatest movies ever made. And then he becomes more involved in his style than the story that he's trying to tell, in my opinion. I completely agree. Like, somebody could tell me differently, and I could say, yes, you like what you're seeing is right. But like when I saw, what was the one with the hotel?
Oh my gosh, we just did a commentary on Life Aquatic and talked about Hotel Grand
Budapest Hotel.
Thank you. Yes.
But yeah, like I'm like, this is so empty. It's so like
yeah.
Like his characters are cartoons of themselves now because he's become so wrapped up in his own aesthetic,
But I do feel like the Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs are wonderful.
I actually loved Isle of Dogs. I did. I forgot about that one and I think it was him stepping out of himself.
Yes,
it was still him. It was still his Artourness, but I think it was just different, a little bit different, and I think. Yeah, I actually enjoyed Isle of Dogs.
I love how strong his style is, and I love his sense of vision. But at the same time, his stuff it very much opens itself up to mockery, I feel.
Right, and I think that's why like everybody like Saturday Night Live and Honest Trailers have all done like parodies of his work, and they've kind of become parodies of themselves, unfortunately. And I think he has genius within him. I just wish he would explore it. Like kind of, and that's why I actually love directors when they're confined. I love like one of my favorite movie by David Lynch is Straight Story, and that's a rated G Disney movie that he directed, like because they couldn't find another director to do it, and it's so him. David Lynch is all over that movie, but it's so brilliant because he's so confined and he's like bursting out of the cracks instead of let loose and anarchy on the screen.
Well, I think. The biggest creative geniuses benefit from a strong guiding hand.
Yes, I agree.
I like. It's great to see somebody just vomit their brilliance all over the screen, but it's also great for them to have somebody telling them, okay, this part's really cool, but maybe pull it back in over here because nobody is going to understand what the heck you're trying to say.
Yeah, and that's like I think a perfect example is the first season of first two seasons, the original Twin Peaks versus the new Twin Peaks, is like he had to make something for broadcast television, for a audience of like it wasn't the saturation we have now. It was for all of America had to want to watch this, and then Showtime's like, oh, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did, and it was, in my opinion, a mess. I think it was his ego like all over the screen and him going a million different ways, and he finally had enough money to do what he wanted, and it was just, it was just kind of a mess, in my opinion. Again,
I've been hot and cold with Lynch over the years. I love Blue Velvet. That was the first movie of his I saw. I watched a little Twin Peaks when it was actually on TV, and at the time was very heavily into my weird for the sake of being weird phase, which lasted
yeah.
longer.
Oh, yeah, we all
Right. Which lasted longer than I care to admit. And since then, like once it hit Netflix or whatever, I was like, oh man, I need to actually go back and watch the whole thing again because it was so cool and so crazy. And I've tried, and oh man, I just find it tedious now. And it's me. It's not it's me, but it's just even made for network TV, not so much. But I can still go back, and I thoroughly enjoy Mulholland Drive.
And yeah, that is another great one. And this is so. Do you have like older siblings at all?
No, I don't.
Siblings.
I've got a.
I have, sorry.
So you had the nice like gateway helpers.
Well, they were okay. So this is me and I have two older brothers, and we're all 5 years apart. So my oldest brother's 10 years older than me.
Oh wow!
And my middle brother is 5 years. Yeah. So. But of course I wanted to be them. I got into metal because my older brother called me Lemmy. Like that was my nickname as a kid. And so I just wanted to, my older brothers were so cool, but my oldest brother dealt with me because he was in college by the time, like he was out of the house by the time I was, but my middle brother, I was a brat. I obviously was, but he kept his bedroom door locked, but of course I would pick the lock and go in, and he rented Twin Peaks from Tower Records when they had rentals, and he was dubbing it from one VCR to the other, so he had a copy. And so I broke into his room. He wasn't home, but he was dubbing it. I'm like, why is he dubbing a soap opera? And I'm like, but it's got to be cool. And so like I sat down, I'm like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I happened to have stolen his copy of Eraserhead around the same time. Didn't realize it was even connected, but he was going through his Lynch phase. And so I saw Eraserhead when I was like probably around 14 or 15, and it just changed my life. I'm like, it was the first movie where I'm like, this can't exist. Like, how does this world, how am I watching this world? This world doesn't exist. And it was like the first time where I realized movies can create an entirely different world. And it was just insane. Like, it just, I mean, and that's when it was Eraserhead that made me go to film school. And so, I have him to thank for that, even though he's probably still mad at me for breaking into his room.
Yeah, I had my early lynching. Let's see. I don't know how old I would have been, but gosh, I might have been like 8 or 9. But wow, we were staying with some friends of my parents, and they went out and left me with their son, who was older. So he didn't want to have anything to do with me. He went off in his room and was listening to music or whatever. And I was out in their living room, and The Elephant Man was on.
Oh.
So at a very young age, saw The Elephant Man, which is, about as mainstream as Lynch gets, probably, aside from this Disney thing that you've brought up that I totally didn't know about and have to look into now. But fairly straightforward movie, but visually it is still very much David Lynch, very tragic. But as a kid, I didn't pick up on the tragedy of it. I just picked up on this monstrous guy, and it freaked me out. And it's funny because later I would see Blue Velvet and have no idea it was even related. At that point I was not paying attention to directors in the same way that I would once I got into my later teens. So I saw Blue Velvet and just thought it was this weird movie, but I was into crime stuff at the time. So like Blue Velvet, I think I watched right around the same time as like Reservoir Dogs and like the 90s crime thing that kind of happened.
Yeah.
So rather than it being a weird cult movie, it was one of those crime movies that just happened to be weird. And I love Dennis Hopper. I already loved Dennis Hopper by the time I saw Blue Velvet. So, matter of fact, that was probably the reason I watched the movie. But then for me, the movie that really like fucked me up and made me like aware that movies could be these sort of deviant, powerful things was Tetsuo the Iron Man.
I've never seen that.
I will be honest, don't. It to this day, I'm disturbed by the imagery of that movie. It
Wow.
is,
I mean, I know the title. It's it seems like it's always wrapped up with like Ichi the Killer. Is it like that? That kind of.
It's well, I don't even know what you would. It's almost like sort of a live action Akira a bit. It's very lo-fi. It's all black and white, and it is. To me, it's the pinnacle of body horror. To this day, I have never seen anything like as spiritually traumatizing as that movie.
You're telling me not to see it, but you're just like
right
now.
Well, that's the thing is I cannot, in good conscience, tell anybody that they need to watch it. But I do have to convey just how singular it is. So I'm sure anybody I talk to immediately is like, all right, I'm going to track this down. But I'm telling you, when it's over, you're going to have to go take a few showers. I mean, it is messed up.
Like, I went through my horror phase when I was like, I think every teenage boy does. And I just like, and then there's some people like sticks with and like really love and I still like a good horror movie, but it's not a genre that I still follow. But like for some reason I got really into Puppet Master. Like that was my my like movies of choice when I was in my horror phase. And I think I own the collection now, but just for kind of nostalgia. But yeah, horror never like stuck with me after I kind of moved on from it.
I don't know that I even describe it as horror. It's definitely more of a cyberpunk. I mean, it's horrifying,
really,
but I wouldn't necessarily put it in the horror genre. I don't know what I would qualify it as, other than just disturbing.
Okay.
So now that we're talking cyber things, how did you end up writing online?
Yeah, somebody sent me a Hard Times article before I knew that they existed, and I think he posted on my Facebook and just thought it was funny and thought like I would relate to it, and I'm like that's really funny, and I'm like I've never heard of the Hard Times, and so I'm like oh they're like the Onion, but they're not as big as the Onion, so they probably like need people, and little did I know that they were already garnering like this huge following. I just hadn't heard of them yet, and so I emailed I was in a day job. I'm still a job that I still have. I shouldn't say I hate it. I actually kind of like my job, but it's a day job.
Right.
And I was just in a bad place, and I'm like, I will do anything now to be creative. And I didn't. And so like I emailed I didn't even look at their website because their website says like how to submit, and I didn't even look at that. I just emailed the first email I could find for them, which is Matt Sanecombe, who started the website. And I'm like, hey, I really like your articles. Like, I had poured through their website after I saw the first one. I liked the one that was sent to me. And I'm like, oh, it's really funny. Like, I'd love to get a chance to submit to you guys one time. And he said, send us 10 article headlines. And I can't remember. I think they have you write one of them, like the full article, to see what your writing style is like.
Right.
And so I sent him 10 articles. And like literally, like I think I was at work when I did it. And he got the email from him, did 10 article headlines right then and sent it to him either later that day or the next morning. And then he got back to me and he's like, we really like this one. And that's what I found out now is with the Hard Times is you send them 10 headlines. If they like some of them, they post them for the other freelancers to read. And we vote on them as well and say like, this is actually really good. You should contact this person.
Nice.
Matt and Bill will both admit like they don't know everything about comedy. And everything about like very specific niche genres and stuff like that. And so they'll post some, and if people really like them, then they get added to the group. So there's actually like 400 people who write for the Hard Times. I'd say only about 100 actively pitch.
That's really smart though, because I mean that's one of the best things about leadership is knowing like where your weaknesses are and how to have other people sort of fulfill them, I guess.
Exactly, and they're actually very good at that, and they're also good at saying like, "No, we got this." Like,
right.
Being the final line of it, and so yeah, and because they started with punk and they kind of grew out of the punk scene, and so like metal is not really what they know, and so me and a couple other guys are kind of like the metal guys, and so if they kind of have questions about it, they'll come to us and ask us what do you guys think about this and stuff like that for specific bands that they might not realize. So they're insanely open about their business and how they run it and how they want things to flow. And I think that's what's made them so successful.
That's cool. Yeah, it's been amazing over the past few years watching them gain ground and really increase their presence, which now you will be doing thanks to the release of Lingeria. I got that right?
Yeah. Well, there's a running joke in the book that nobody knows how to pronounce it because it's
because they're all reading the books.
Exactly. Lingeria is the name of a book series within this book.
Right.
And it was actually a joke that I realized that I hadn't said it out loud while I wrote it because I actually didn't tell anybody except for my wife that I was writing it. Because I was like, if this fails, I'm not gonna tell people I have a failed book out there. If I quit, because I quit a lot of things. So I'm like, no, I'm just gonna kind of keep my head down. I told a couple people who I wanted to read chapters, but really my wife was the only one who knew I was doing it. And then when I started kind of putting it around, I'm like, I've never said this word out loud. And then I'm like, that's funny, because then I realized that people in the book would have never said it out loud. And so that's kind of a running gag that everybody pronounces it differently.
Oh, that's tremendous. I love it. Yeah, I got a few pages in, but I think I got it from you Saturday or Sunday maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I sent it to you earlier, but I unfortunately did not. So thank you for trying to.
You had mentioned sending it to me, but I've been, like I said, schedule's been insane. Just Monday night, I got to pretend I was Andre the Giant, which was pretty awesome. So I haven't had time, but I'm looking forward because I got a few pages in, and I was like, all right, I'm actually going to have to devote time to this and not just skim it over. So give us the pitch. What is the elevator pitch? Because I've got kind of a sense of it, but I want to hear your description.
Sure. It is a humorous fantasy novel that starts off with a suicide attempt. It is basically if George R.R. Martin was sucked into the world of Westeros, and everybody thought that the books that he had written were the Bible, and he was their god and creator. And so the main character, I can't remember my main character's name right now. It's been a long day. Norman. Bases off of actually L. Frank Baum, who got really fed up with having to write Oz books. And I love the Oz books. And I read that he wanted to write other things, and everybody's like, nope, this is what you're famous for. This is what you got to do. And I'm like, well, what if he had to go to Oz and was sick of this world and these characters were waiting for him. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And it was originally going to be a cartoon, and it just wasn't working. I was kind of doing an Adult Swim kind of Ugly Americans idea, and I couldn't put it together. And it was actually my wife was like, I really like your scene descriptions in your screenplays. You should just try and do something with that. And so I kind of had this idea, and I'm like, well, maybe I should try and write a funny book. And that's kind of where it came from, was kind of all these things coalescing together. And so Norman is depressed, and he's about to gas himself in his oven when a portal to Lingeria opens up, and one of his main characters is on the other side. And somehow his books, 4 of the 16 of his books have made it to Lingeria somehow, and they're the Lingerian Bible, and they believe him to be the author. They call him the author, but it's basically God. And so they worship him as a god in this world.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the scene descriptions, because from the opening with the way that you described the room of doors, I was immediately like, I can see this. I love this idea. I love that he's out of space and dude's just nailing it to the floor at this point. Your visual style, and actually you were talking about earlier, the visualizing the scenes and giving a lot of detail in your screenplays. I definitely would like to see a world come to life. Although it's like I said, picturing it is very easy.
Oh, thank you. I actually appreciate that. I wanted to be. I don't like dense books because I have a hard time focusing. Like I've said 1,000 times as I'm jittering about here. And so I wanted a book that people get, and that's my favorite reviews on Amazon right now are people saying it's a light read. It's a very easy, fun read, and I love that. I love books that you just kind of breeze through and you're like, that was fun.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I was going for, and I had a lot of fun writing it. I feel like it kind of comes through that I was just kind of enjoying myself while I was like, oh, this would be a fun idea, and I just kind of like wandered down this path for a chapter, and so yeah, I'm glad. Thank you very much. I'm glad you liked it.
Well, excuse me. I just was trying to take a sip of water and think and talk at the same time, and it did not work out for me. Where can we find it, and how do we follow what's going on with it?
Sure. You can find it on Amazon. That's the only place to get it right now. I think I'll be doing some cons, I hope, to sell paperbacks. I'm still kind of figuring this world out. I don't know, like renting tables and all this other stuff. I'm still figuring this out. But right now, Amazon, if you search for Lingeria, Lingeria, I would write book afterwards, because Lingeria is a different way to spell lingerie, which is the reason I got the name from a Russian spam email that I got that was selling sexy lingeria, and I'm like, that sounds like a world. And so, but I didn't think it all the way through that when people search for it, they're going to get pictures of women in lingerie. So Lingeria book is the best way to find it on Amazon, and then I am on the social media platforms K0ZUH, and Lingeria has an Instagram account that's Lingeria Book that you can look up as well.
Very cool. Before we wrap this thing up, is there anything else you wanted to throw out there? Anything else you wanted to put over, mention, or just what are you up to right now?
Just hawking the book. That's what I've focused on. I have started another one. There is a Lingeria book 2 of one that I have an idea for, but I've actually started working on a different book. But that's a long way away right now. I'm just hawking my book and writing for the hard times, and that's about all I got on the burner right now.
I already love the idea of book 2 of one. That's great. Now you have to do it, because that's too good.
Oh, the idea is there. It's percolating right now. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with it.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to finishing the book, and also look forward to reading more Hard Times articles from you.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me on. I love your podcast. You're a fantastic interviewer, so this is really easy, actually.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I am hoping to talk to Dan again soon, and I got to tell you, I think there's probably a podcast about Micro Machines to be had, especially with the announcement that Hasbro is now working with Wicked Cool Toys to bring Micro Machines back to the market. That's right, breaking news right here on the Needless Things podcast. Micro Machines will be coming back to stores near you sometime very soon. That's pretty awesome, right? I hope we see the licensed ones again. I wish I still had all those James Bond Micro Machines. Anyway, that was Dan. He's awesome. Please go check out all his social media, and go check out Lingeria. And also go to Needless Things _ on Twitter. You can probably just look up Needless Things Podcast and just tweet hashtag Phantom Snow Stories. And we will pick a winner live on next week's show. Or I guess live as we record next week's show. Mr. Bobby Nash himself will be here to choose the winner. And we'll make a little game out of it. I'll have some fun with Bobby. What else? Big things are coming up very soon. I cannot yet announce the thing that is happening on July the 14th. I will just tell you, mark July the 14th on your Needless Things calendar. It is going to be momentous, and I mean that. Not like 200th episode momentous, but definitely a big feather in the cap of the Needless Things family, and a big surprise is going to be there. It's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to announce it to the public. Also, I will be in Wilmington, North Carolina at the end of June, and I'm going to take care of this whole Swamp Thing business. I'm going to get that show back on the air, and also hopefully do some interviews with our pals at Memory Lane Comics. And there you go. I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.